They called her a criminal, but she was just a girl with a fragile soul, crossing the border with blistered feet and a heart made of paper. Her name was Maria, but names fade in the desert, when your lips crack from thirst and your voice dies before the sun does. She walked under the weight of two lives, her own and the one growing inside her. 7 months along, no shoes, no passport, no plan, just a plastic cross around her neck and a prayer stitched into her breath. They say the border is just a line, but lines don't burn your souls or make children drown in silence. This one did. Every step she took was a memory she tried to forget. The bruises, the men with rings on every finger and no mercy in their eyes. The night she ran from the last one, belly swollen, bleeding hope. She didn't want to leave her country. She wanted to live. But the law don't ask why. It only asks who to punish. And so she walked, through heat that bent the air like fire, through dust that tasted like ash, through nights so still even God seemed to hold his breath. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew what she was running from, and sometimes that's enough to keep a soul moving. She whispered lullabies to the child inside her, Spanish lullabies her mother used to sing before death took her voice. They were lullabies about rivers and stars and dreams that didn't end in cages. But dreams don't mean much when your feet are bleeding. When every cactus looks like a soldier and every sound in the dark might be the last one you hear, still she walked because something in her refused to die. Not yet. Not without trying. If you've ever felt forgotten, if you've ever been blamed just for trying to survive, stay with me. This story wasn't born to be pretty. It was born to be told. The sun hadn't risen yet, but the pain had, sharp, relentless, like knives twisting in her spine. Maria dropped to her knees in the dust, mouth open, but no scream came, only silence. Even her agony was quiet, as if she was afraid the desert would hear and send someone to finish her. The child was coming, too early, too alone. She had nothing, not a blanket, not a midwife, not a name for the life pushing through her bones, only a torn t-shirt she'd been given 2 borders ago, and the sky, wide and blind, watching her break open. She bit down on her own arm to keep from crying out. Blood ran down her wrist, mixed with tears, sweat, and something ancient, that fierce kind of strength only mothers know. She pressed her back against a rock, legs shaking, belly hard. The world spun, her vision blurred, and then a sound, not a scream, not a cry, just breath, small, raw, alive. The baby lay in her arms, trembling and red, wrapped in that old t-shirt, eyes shut, but breathing. A boy, born in the no-man's land between countries. No papers, no doctor, no witness, but God. She wanted to sing, but her throat was dry. So she just held him, rocked him, let him feel a heartbeat that had refused to give up. But she knew, even in that holy moment, that she couldn't keep him. She couldn't run with a newborn, couldn't risk him dying in her arms. Not him, not after everything. She looked up at the sky, as if asking for permission, and somewhere between the wind and the stars, she heard her mama's lullaby. It was time. She stood, legs weak, soul shaking, and walked toward the fence. The baby, still breathing, still silent. And then she placed him down, wrapped tight, with a note she couldn't sign, because names get people killed. But just as she turned to walk away, she heard something that made her blood freeze. But that cry wasn't the baby. It wasn't the baby's voice. It was lower, older, a voice soaked in authority and static, and it came with footsteps, heavy boots breaking through the brush like thunder. Maria's body locked. Her knees went weak, but her instinct screamed louder. Run! She turned, but it was too late. 3 figures in black vests emerged from the shadows, guns low, voices high, English words barked like dogs. She couldn't understand most of them, but fear don't need translation. Hands where I can see them. Step away from the package. Package, that's what they called him. Her child. She raised her hands slowly, fingers trembling, dirt under every nail. And as they shouted, the baby whimpered, still wrapped in that cotton t-shirt, still nameless, still sacred. One officer kicked the bundle lightly with his boot, then flinched when he heard the breath inside it. "Jesus," he muttered. "He's real." Another one pulled out a phone, started filming. Because in their world, a baby at the border is content. Clicks. A moment to go viral. But Maria didn't care. She only looked at her son, just once more, long enough to memorize the curve of his lip, the way his fist clutched nothing, as if already learning what this world offers. Then came the cuffs, cold, tight, too big for her wrists, but just right to erase her dignity. They pushed her down into the dirt, knees on her back, gun near her face, and the baby cried for real this time. Soft at first, then louder, like something divine, waking up. She screamed, not for help, not in protest, but from a place inside her that had no name, only ache. And then silence again. The sirens arrived, border patrol vans, an ambulance, lights like judgment. No one asked her if she was okay. No one asked why she left him, only what her name was. But even then, she stayed silent, because in her silence, she still had power. But what she didn't know was someone else had been watching, from behind the thorn bush, holding a phone and recording everything, and that someone wasn't supposed to be there. They booked her without a word, fingerprint by fingerprint, ink pressed into her skin like sin. No translator, no mercy, only numbers. They didn't ask if she was bleeding, if she was hungry, if her body still trembled from giving birth in the wild. They just wrote one word on the form: illegal. Like that erased her motherhood, like that swallowed the blood, the prayer, the lullaby. The cold in the cell was not a cold of temperature. It was the cold of being unwanted, unwelcome, untouched. She curled on the bench, arms across her chest, as if she could still feel him there, that tiny weight she once carried, now somewhere behind a steel door. They gave her a blanket that smelled like bleach, and silence, always silence. In the morning, they marched her into a van. No window, just metal and a cage. She didn't cry. Not anymore. Tears a luxury. And she'd spent hers on birth. They drove her 3 hours west, to a place she didn't know, to a building without signs, but full of stories just like hers. In the courtroom the air was dry, the kind that cracks your lips before you speak, and she stood there, shackled, tired, invisible. The judge entered, white, hair pinned tight, robe flawless, eyes sharp with something that wasn't justice. Maria looked up, and the judge looked down, not at her, but through her, and then the judge laughed, not loud, not cruel, just a small, smug sound, like she'd seen this before, and knew how it ended. She turned to the clerk and said something Maria couldn't understand, and everyone else laughed too, except one woman, sitting near the back, clipboard in hand, eyes wide and wet. She was supposed to stay silent, just observe, but something about Maria, about that moment, made her chest ache, because she knew she had once been Maria, before the papers, before the salary, before she learned to look away, and now she had a choice. But the judge kept speaking, fast. Final. Case dismissed. Deportation approved. Then she added, with a smirk that cut deeper than any sentence, they always run from their responsibilities. And that was when the woman in the back stood up, because she couldn't stay silent anymore. The room fell still, like someone had turned off the world. No gavel, no whisper, just one pair of heels. Stepping forward, the woman held her clipboard tight, as if it could shield her from the weight of what she was about to do. She wasn't supposed to speak, not there, not then. But some truths burn through silence like fire through dry grass. "Your Honor," she said, voice trembling but whole, "this case isn't over." The judge looked up, startled, offended. "How dare you interrupt this court?" But the woman kept walking, each step pulling courage from somewhere deeper than rules. She gave birth alone in the desert. She wrapped that baby in her own shirt. She didn't abandon him. She saved him. Gasps from the gallery. A guard stepped forward, hand on his belt, but the woman raised her hand. "I recorded it," she said. Silence. "I was there, behind the fence. I wasn't supposed to be, but I saw the whole thing, and I filmed it." She reached into her coat, pulled out her phone, shaking. "I've been carrying this for weeks. I thought if I showed it, I'd lose my job. But if I stayed quiet, I'd lose my soul." The judge's eyes narrowed. "That video is inadmissible," she said. "It was obtained illegally." "But what about the truth?" the woman asked. And in that moment, even the guards didn't know what to do, because law knows rules, but truth knows faces. And Maria, she was still standing, still silent, but something in her eyes had shifted. The judge, red-faced now, barked, "Remove her from the court!" But before they could touch her, a voice came from the back, deep, rough, old. "She has the right to speak." It was a man in a janitor's uniform, mop still wet beside him, another immigrant, invisible until he wasn't. The judge stared at him, then at Maria, then at the woman with the phone, and for the first time, she looked uncertain, like maybe, just maybe. Her robe didn't make her untouchable, but what Maria did next shook the whole room. She spoke, and the words she said weren't in English. Her voice didn't rise. It floated, soft, cracked, but full of something no court could deny. She spoke in her mother's tongue, Spanish that rolled like water over stones, not for them to understand, but for her to finally be whole. "Mi hijo no es un crimen. My son is not a crime." The translator didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared. "Yo soy madre." I am a mother. And with each word her back straightened, chains still on her wrists, but the weight had shifted. It wasn't guilt anymore. It was history, pride, dignity, reborn. The judge ordered the translator to speak, so he did. But something about hearing it in English felt colder, less sacred. Still, the room listened. "He was born in silence, but he is not forgotten. I gave him life once. I will not let them take it from him now." The woman with the phone stepped closer, placed it on the judge's bench, hit play, and there it was. A blurry video, dust blowing across the lens. Maria on her knees, sweating, praying, bleeding, giving life to a child alone, not running, not hiding, choosing. The room was no longer a courtroom. It was a confessional, a reckoning. Even the guard looked away. The janitor whispered a prayer. The translator wiped his eye. And the judge, she sat back, silent, because the law had nothing left to say. But somewhere in that holy silence, the baby's cry echoed from the video, a cry too young to know injustice, too sacred to ignore. And then, from behind the chamber doors, a new voice emerged, sharp suit, briefcase in hand. "Sorry I'm late," the man said. He was the new lawyer, appointed, but not yet broken by the system, and he had one question on his lips. "Where's the child now?" The lawyer's voice sliced through the silence, not loud, but precise, like he knew how to make the room hold its breath. "Where is the child now?" No one answered, not the judge, not the guards, not even the woman with the phone, because in all the paperwork, in all the hearings, in all the orders stamped and signed, no one had asked. The baby, her baby, had become a ghost in the system. The lawyer set down his briefcase, opened it slowly. Inside, a single folder, thin, dusty. He pulled out a document, blank where it should have held a name. No fingerprints, no record of medical care, just one line. "Infant male, found at border, status, unknown." Unknown, as if breath didn't count, as if heartbeat meant nothing, as if love could be erased by bureaucracy. Maria's knees buckled slightly, not from fear, but from rage, holy rage. She stepped forward. The chains on her ankles scraped the floor, but her voice didn't tremble. "You took him, and then you lost him." The judge opened her mouth, but the words never came, because the lawyer raised something else. A photo, a grainy image, Security cam footage from a holding facility. In it, a nurse walks past a bassinet. Inside, a baby, wrapped in a t-shirt, one small hand reaching into nothing. Maria gasped. Her hands flew to her chest, as if trying to hold her own soul in place. "That was 10 days ago," the lawyer said, "and no one has seen him since." The room turned to ice, because babies don't just disappear, unless someone wants them to. The janitor leaned on his mop. The woman with the phone sat down slowly. The translator crossed himself, and the judge, she stood, clutched the bench, and whispered something no one expected to hear. "Call the Office of Refugee Resettlement. Now." But even as the clerk reached for the phone, the woman's phone buzzed, a message, one line, from a contact with no name, only a symbol. It said, "You're being watched. Stop asking about the boy." And suddenly, the courtroom didn't feel safe anymore. That night they moved Maria, no warning, no explanation, just a clipboard at midnight and a guard who wouldn't meet her eyes. She asked where she was going, no answer. She asked about her son, only silence. They shackled her again, tighter this time, as if dignity was something they feared in her. The van was waiting, no windows, no markings, just steel and shadows. They pushed her inside, 2 other women already there, one asleep, the other crying quietly into her knees. The engine started, and with it, so did the prayers, soft Spanish, like songs sung by grandmothers in kitchens before the world turned cruel. Maria joined them, not with her lips, but with her eyes, because hope, in that moment, was the only thing she still owned. Outside, the desert passed by unseen. Inside, time moved like a wound. No questions, no answers, just a hum of wheels over dirt and bones. Then, the van stopped. Doors opened. They were in a facility she hadn't seen before, not the usual detention center. This one was smaller, quieter, too quiet. No other detainees, no officers in uniform, just 2 men in suits, and a woman in heels. Clipboard, lipstick too red. She looked at Maria and said one thing in perfect Spanish. "Say you abandoned him, and we'll help you leave." Maria said nothing, so the woman leaned in. "You don't have a name, no passport, no family. He's gone. The sooner you forget him, the easier this gets." But what they didn't know was that Maria had already died once, back there in the desert, when she laid him down. What was left now was something different, not soft, not scared, but still sacred. And she looked that woman straight in the eyes. "I'll never forget him, and I'll never say it, not even in hell." The woman's smile faded. She turned to the men. "Take her below." But as they reached for her arms, a voice came through the radio, rough, urgent. "The lawyer's outside, and he's not alone." They tried to block him, tried to shut the gates before his shoes touched the gravel, but he kept walking, not fast, not angry, just certain, like a man who knew truth was on his side. Behind him a storm was forming, not clouds but people. A quiet crowd, mothers, daughters, men with hats in their hands and pain in their eyes, all of them holding something sacred, a name, a face, a child the system forgot. The lawyer stepped forward. "I know you're hiding her," he said. "To do what? I don't care to imagine. But we have proof she was moved without cause, and we're not leaving without her." The guard at the gate hesitated, because the badge on his chest didn't cover this kind of moment, where orders collide with something deeper. Behind him, through the slit in the metal doors, the woman in red heels watched. Lipstick faded, grip on her clipboard unsteady. She knew this was no longer a procedure, it was exposure. The lawyer handed the guard a paper, a court order, fresh, signed, sealed. He leaned in. "And before you pretend you can ignore this, let me remind you, cameras are on." He pointed behind him. And there they were, 3 journalists, microphones like spears, lenses like shields. The guard turned pale, and somewhere deep inside that facility, Maria sat on a metal chair, hands still cuffed, eyes closed. She hadn't been told what was happening, but she felt it in her bones, in her breath, in the way the air changed, lighter, warmer, like hope had slipped through the cracks. One of the suited men stormed down the hall, barking into a radio. "They're breaching protocol. Call the director, now!" But before he could reach the door, the lights flickered, then died. Complete darkness. For 3 long seconds, no sound. Then backup generators buzzed on, dim emergency lighting, red, faint. And in that glow, Maria saw something on the wall. A sign. "Nursery unit. Restricted." Her breath caught. The man hadn't noticed it, too busy shouting, but she had. And somewhere behind that door, she heard a sound. Not a voice, not a cry, a lullaby. She moved before she was told. Quick, quiet, like only mothers do when something ancient pulls them. The suited man grabbed her arm, but it was too late. The door had already swung open. The nursery, empty cribs lined up in rows like forgotten prayers, all clean, all cold, except one. In the corner, under a soft, flickering light, a bundle, small, breathing, wrapped in something that didn't belong there, a torn grey T-shirt. Maria's knees hit the floor, not from weakness, but from reverence. Her son, alive, eyes closed, but breathing that same rhythm she had once sung to in the dark. She reached out, hands trembling, and as her fingertips brushed his cheek, the door slammed behind her, locked. She turned, banged on the glass. Outside, the woman in heels stared in, expression unreadable. "Why are you doing this?" Maria cried, and for the first time, the woman answered honestly, "Because the moment the world sees this, everything we built comes down." Behind her, the lawyer appeared, breathless, furious. He saw Maria through the glass, the child, the cuffs, and he did something Maria hadn't expected. He prayed, right there, in front of cameras, in front of fear, a short prayer, ragged, real. "Lord, let truth be louder than silence." The woman tried to turn, to shout, to control the room, but then another voice rang out from the hallway, firm, commanding, "You're done here." A woman in uniform, badge polished, eyes dark with clarity, an agent from the Office of Civil Rights, pulled by the video, by the story, by the God that speaks through mothers who never gave up. She raised a document. "Under federal order, this facility is being shut down. Effective immediately." The woman with the heels took one step back, then another. But the walls had heard enough, so had the world. And Maria, she looked down at her son. He opened his eyes, dark, deep, just like hers, and he smiled. But outside that glass, a man was still watching, silent, filming, with a badge that didn't belong to him, and he wasn't done yet. He stood near the fire exit. No one noticed him at first, not the reporters, not the guards, not even the lawyer, until it was too late, a phone in his hand, but not recording, streaming to someone, somewhere, a shadow watching from far above. His badge said security, but the agency didn't exist. No patch, no department, no file, just letters and silence. He watched Maria cradle her son, watched the civil rights agent shut down the nursery, watched the cameras turn toward justice, and then he whispered into his collar, "Code 7, mother and child reconnected, but there's interference." The voice that replied came through static, cold, metallic. "Do not engage, but mark the infant. We'll handle it off record." He turned, slipped out the back door, but not before dropping something near the exit, a small device, no bigger than a coin, blinking red. Inside, Maria kissed her son's forehead, for the first time, not in fear, but in truth. She looked at the lawyer. "Will they try to take him again?" He paused, then said what no one else had dared to. "They never stopped." The woman from Civil Rights moved toward them. "He'll be placed under protection, and you'll be processed for asylum with full testimony." That video changed everything. Maria nodded, but deep inside, something didn't feel finished. Because justice, real justice, never comes easy, especially when the system profits from silence. The cameras were gone now, the reporters packing up, the headlines already forming. But somewhere, in a cold office, behind glass and power, a man lit a cigarette, watched the footage from the fake security guard's stream, and smiled. She'll talk. She'll testify. Let her. He exhaled smoke, tapped ash into a crystal tray. But we've still got the paper. The woman beside him raised an eyebrow. What paper? He pulled out a sealed envelope, stamped, signed, filed weeks ago. Voluntary abandonment, he said. The woman frowned. But she never signed that. He smirked. Doesn't matter. We have her name and a signature that looks close enough. Then he leaned back in his chair. Let the court play hero. We'll win in the shadows. But what he didn't know was that the janitor had seen him drop that coin near the exit, and in his mop bucket he kept more than water. He kept secrets. And this time he wasn't going to keep them quiet. His name was Simon. No one asked, they just called him Old Man, or that cleaner who smells like cigarettes and pine. But Simon knew things, because when you clean the floors of America's silence, you hear everything. He'd seen Maria before the transfer. He'd seen the van. He'd heard the woman in heels whisper, "She won't even remember the child after a week." And he wrote it down in a little notebook he kept inside his boot, next to a matchstick crucifix his sister carved before ICE took her. Simon was no saint, but he believed in holy things, truth, witness, reckoning. And when he saw that blinking coin-shaped device near the nursery exit, he knew. That wasn't surveillance. That was a tag, a tracker, for the baby. He didn't hesitate. Not at his age. Not after everything he'd cleaned up and swallowed. He scooped it into his bucket, tossed it beneath the soapy rags, and kept pushing. He made it to the lawyer's car just as the cameras were being packed away. The man looked confused. "Sir, this area's restricted." Simon didn't speak, just lifted the device, still blinking. This was outside the baby's room. The lawyer froze, eyes narrowing. "Where?" Simon pointed, then added, "They're still watching, even now." The lawyer grabbed the device gently, wrapped it in a napkin from his glove box, and looked at Simon with a question he couldn't ask. But Simon answered anyway. "Don't trust paper, don't trust badges, trust the mothers. They're the ones who bleed." Inside, Maria was filling out forms, the real ones this time, with her name, her story, and a fingerprint that told no lies. But when she looked out the window, she saw Simon. He nodded once, just once, and she knew she wasn't alone anymore. But that paper, the fake one, the one they'd used to take him again, it was already being filed, and next week a new judge would read it aloud, as if it were truth. The courtroom smelled of bleach and old lies. Same benches, same flags, same silence, but this time it wasn't the desert that made Maria sweat. It was the envelope, sitting there, on the judge's bench, unopened, but heavy, like it already knew how this was going to end. This judge was new, younger, eyes sharp, like glass not yet broken. But Maria had learned, a robe doesn't make a heart righteous, and youth doesn't mean truth. The lawyer stood tall. Beside him, Maria. Beside her, the woman who once broke protocol for the sake of a baby's breath. They had the video. They had the witness. They had the tracker Simon found, now deactivated, wrapped in evidence tape. But the envelope, that paper, it changed everything. "Your Honor," the opposing counsel said, "before we proceed, the department submits a voluntary abandonment form, signed by the petitioner." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Voluntary?" Maria's lawyer stepped forward. "She never signed that document. It's forged. Do you have proof?" He paused, then said something unexpected. "No, not yet." The judge looked to Maria. "Did you willingly abandon your child?" She didn't answer with words. She stepped forward, held up the shirt, that same torn cotton, still stained, still sacred. "He is not abandoned. He is mine. He always was. Even when I left him under the fence, I was praying someone would hear him before death did." The room went still. The judge looked down at the form, then at the video now playing from a monitor, the birth, the wrapping, the cry. She watched, eyes never blinking. When it ended, she exhaled, then turned to the department. "This form has no timestamp, no witness, and no chain of custody." She lifted her gavel, just slightly. which means this isn't evidence, it's obstruction. The gavel came down, and the sound it made wasn't loud, but it cracked something open, like dry ground finally touched by rain. The lawyer turned to Maria. You're free, and he's yours, legally, forever. But freedom, Maria knew, was never just a ruling. It was living without fear of the next knock at the door, the next forged paper, the next disappearing child. So when she stepped outside that courtroom, holding her son, she didn't smile. She breathed, deep, slow, like a woman who had died and come back. But someone else hadn't taken that ruling quietly, because the man behind the forgery had just lost his grip. And men like him don't go down without leaving scars. It arrived 3 days later, no stamp, no return address, just folded once and left on the doorstep of the lawyer's apartment. Inside, one sentence. You've made enemies who erase people for sport. And below it, a fingerprint, smudged, small. The lawyer called Maria, told her to pack. They were moving her again, not for deportation, but for protection, because truth had won, but truth had also exposed something deeper, a machine, one that didn't forgive. They placed Maria in a safe house, outside the city, near the edge of nothing, where even the moon seemed to whisper. She held her son close, sang to him, not the lullaby of rivers and stars, but a new one about dignity and fire, and names that don't disappear. But something still haunted her, the silence, the quiet after the storm, and then a knock. It was Simon, hat in hand, notebook in his pocket. He looked older than before, like carrying too many truths had bent his bones. I have something for you, he said. It was a letter, from a woman, the one with the red heels. She'd disappeared after the shutdown. No trace, no title, gone. But she'd left a note with Simon, only to be given if Maria survived the trial. It read, I once helped them take children, told myself it was protocol, but when I saw you kneel in that desert, I remembered my own mother, running barefoot through cane fields, holding me like the world would end. I can't undo what I did, but I can help bring them down. Inside this envelope are names, files, the real network. You don't owe me anything, just finish what I couldn't. Inside the envelope, photocopies, photos, transactions, cold, precise, enough to bring down more than a facility, enough to bring down the silence itself. Maria looked at her son, sleeping now, peaceful, and for the first time she prayed not just to survive, but to speak, loud. For all the mothers still searching for their children, they tried to bury her voice behind walls. But some voices grow louder in silence. Some stories are too sacred to forget. Maria stayed in that safe house for a month, not hiding, healing. Her son learned to smile in the quiet, to trust arms that didn't disappear, to reach for a face he now knew would always be there. The lawyer took the evidence to the Department of Justice. Doors that had stayed shut for years creaked open. A full investigation began, not just into the fake documents, but into the private contractors, the for-profit centers, the men who traded children like stock. And through it all, Maria waited, prayed, not for vengeance, but for dignity. The woman in red heels was never found. Some say she fled, others say she was taken, but her envelope, it changed everything. The story hit the news. Not the front page, not at first, but it spread. Whispers, blogs, church bulletins, screenshots passed between cousins across states. The woman who gave birth in the desert and never gave up. People began to write her. Letters from detention centers, from halfway houses, from grandmothers raising children who were never meant to be left behind. And one day, a package arrived, wrapped in brown paper, no name. Inside, a hand-sewn baby blanket. Stitched into it the words, "We see you, we are you, gracias." Maria cried then, not from grief, but from something older, something like resurrection. She walked outside, held her son up to the wind, and whispered into his ear, "You were born in silence, but you will live in truth." That night, she lit a candle, not for the past, not even for justice, but for the women whose stories would never be told, who died crossing rivers, who labored under the heat, who screamed into the night and were never heard. She whispered their names, even the ones she didn't know, and when she finished, she looked up. The sky above her, not black, not blue, but pale, thin, like parchment, like a sky made of paper, where stories could finally fly. If this story touched something inside you, leave a comment. Share it with someone who needs to hear, because there are truths that don't need to be shouted. They need to be whispered until the whole world learns how to listen. Silence. Amen.